Good morning to all my supporters, subscribers, people who like to hear the entertainment of my videos. Hope y'all doing well out there this morning as well as your families. And as always, this is for entertainment and historical purposes only. Reading is fundamental. I just wanted to let y'all know, this right here, putting these stories out, is starting to come therapeutic for me. So I thank y'all for helping me get into this state, because without y'all wanting to hear these stories and things of that nature, it wouldn't have urged me to push forward with these stories. So appreciate it. And I also wanted to add, it was a time, everybody got their reasons why they liked famous dogmen of the past. And mine has always been, my favorite type of dogmen were always the ones who were just not good with the dogs and, put out good dogs. But they were good conditioners. They were good with aftercare. And they were also good with articulating the breed through various writings. And that's what drives me. I know you got a lot of bloggers who put out videos on these dogs, and whatever their reasons are for doing them, so be it, more power to them. But I know what drives me. And what drives me is going to the mailbox, and the ones who are around that understand what I'm talking about, going to the mailbox, picking those letters out, getting that mail and getting those magazines and just reading. So that was something I always look forward to. I might have had subscriptions to maybe up to 6 or 7 magazines, and every couple months one to fold, and you had some consistency ones that were consistent, but that's what drives me that time. So like I said, my favorite dogmen were the ones who could, write, and they had magazines, and they were also writers and contributors through various magazines. Like for instance, you had your Barney Fife's, great contributor to magazines, great aftercare conditioner. You had your Russian Bills, great articulating the breed through his writings. Your Bob Stevens, Wildside Kennels, Mr. Bill with Don Carter, Robert Lim, Don Mayfield, Jack Kelly. I mean, all these guys, they stood out to me, and it's a whole host of others, but these ones, they all stood out because the way they articulated the breed. If you wasn't at the actual site, or even if it's part of the history, the way they, worded they stories and made you feel like it was there. So that's what drives me. That's what pushed me. And I hope through all of these stories I put out, you feel like you there, so as we go back in time. So now let's get to why y'all came here. We're going to do a piece on the champion Butcherboy Sampson story. And this was put out through, if I'm not mistaken, I think Ronnie Hyde passed away, but this was this is what, he put out during that time in 1973. And of course we know Butcherboy was owned by Norman Houghton, and assisted with Maurice Carver. And Sampson was a good dog, and he was owned by the combine of Stinson and Glover, same ones who own Grand Champion Art. Excuse me, had a hiccup. So let's get to it. It was in April 1973. Me and my mom and dad went down to San Antonio to some big fights down there. Barker Davis, who also owned Grand Champion Boomerang, was matched into Don Mayfield. Maurice was matched into Stinson and Glover. Jim Taylor was using the old Sam dog, which may or may not be Satch's daddy. Who knows? It was a real big upset that day. First of all, I bet on the Chivo dog, and everybody knows the outcome of that. Chivo was picked up in 27 minutes. Old Mayfield really had 400 fine-tuned that day. He sure was a very fast-mouthed dog. He didn't bite hard, but he sure wore him down. But everyone has his own suspicions on what might have happened that day, because Barker conditioned better than that. I'm not pointing any fingers at nobody, but I kind of figured there was something that went on here. Then next, it was Maurice time up. He went and got Bigfoot to go into the Sampson dog. Bigfoot was a Bullison bred dog. We didn't know until after the fight Bigfoot wasn't but 18 months old. Needless to say, I've done lost my ass on Chivo, turned around and bet on Maurice and lost my ass on that. Maurice fight, I believe, went 40 or 50 minutes. This was the Sampson dog. I will work Butcherboy for Maurice and Norman to whip him. I believe Sampson was 3 years old and Butcherboy was 6 or 7 years old. It was during that show that Bobby Hall stands up and knocks the shit out of Don Maloney. The fight breaks out. Maurice had to break all the fights up. Then while Maurice was handling, they were down on the floor and the old boy bumped into Maurice. He drawed back and told him not to be bumping into him. God damn it, I beat his fucking brains out. Then old Sam went in there with Jim Taylor out of Mississippi handling. This is the same Jim Taylor they used to call the bitch man. Needless to say, I bet on Sam and lost. That was a big loss for us that day. Everybody from Georgia got took to the cleaners, so we kind of tucked our pride up and our pocketbooks and came on home. I went there with the intention to buy 4 or 5 dogs for Maurice when the fights were over. Took 5 kennels with me, but ended up with no money. I had been after Maurice to come stay with him to go through a keep. He told me to call Leo. So I got up one morning and called Leo bright and early. I was ready to go. I woke up with him that morning. I woke him up. That was the wrong thing to do. I told him what Maurice had told me to tell him, that I bought dogs for Maurice and I wanted to stay through a keep with him. Leo told me, well, if you bought some dogs for Maurice, then you go stay through a keep with him, and hung up the phone. But truthfully, I would have rather stayed with Maurice than Leo anyway. About the 1st of August, I went down there to stay with Maurice. We were fighting the 1st of October when I got there. Maurice was out working Butcherboy out of a Delta 88 convertible with a 455 motor in it. I pulled up. He was working the old dog, and I shined my flashlight over in his face, and he couldn't make out who I was. I said, "What are you doing out here?" He said, "I'm out here getting this dog ready for a swimming contest." We talked for a few minutes. Then he says, "Get that goddamn light out of my eyes." I put it down. He says, "Goddamn, son, I didn't think you I didn't think you were going to make it. I just called your house this evening to see if you were on your way." I got out and walked over there and ran my hands down Butcherboy's back. He told me, "You're the first son of a bitch I seen that can just walk up and handle that dog right away besides me and Norman." He likes you. So me and Butcher Boy took up with one another right off. We went right back to the house and got situated. Then went back into my truck to work the dog. I had a four-wheel drive Chevrolet truck at the time, and I believe if we hadn't had that truck, we could never have gotten Butcher Boy in as good as shape. It was pretty rainy that season. Butch was a big old dog. He was hard to hold on the end of a rope and drive the truck too. Butch would go hunting. Every night we would pick up 4 to 6 frogs and hold them between his. Every night he would pick up 4 to 6 frogs and hold them between his front teeth until he sucked the juice out of them. At the end of every night, he would have 4 or 5 frogs in his mouth at one time. He wouldn't pick one up and drop it. He would have them all in his mouth at the end of his work. Maurice said, "God damn, son. We don't have to worry about no rub. If that son of a bitch can bite into that, we don't have to worry about nothing they put on us." We tried working him during the daytime to see if he could take the heat, but he couldn't take the heat there in San Antonio that time of year. So we make him work about 12 o'clock at night until daylight at the peak of his work. We got the old dog ready. This is the first time steroids were ever used on a dog. I introduced him to Maurice. I learned about it at a racetrack. I said not to be spreading the word about this. It's kind of a secret weapon. First thing I know, he had told Bobby Hall, and Bobby told everybody in the country for that matter. That's when the steroid kick started catching on. I got to visit a lot of people while I was out there. You could see anybody from the sheriff down to the local Mexican. Anybody and everybody was welcome at Maurice's house, except for a select few he wouldn't let come around. I met Ray Long, old man Krill down there. I want to say one thing. It's been wrote in that Grady Cummins came down to visit while Maurice and I was working Butcher Boy. I have never met Grady in my life, and he damn sure didn't come to visit me and Maurice. He's such a know-it-all on everything. I just wanted to get that out in the open, that Grady Cummins was not there, and that's the truth. Me and Butcher Boy got along real good. I really thought a lot of him. I wish I had 100 like him. Fight day rolls around. We got down there. Maurice was trying to get up his bet. David Taylor was supposed to take part in the bet. I had 200 or 300 I wanted to put on Butch, but Maurice, he had to see what David was going to do. Maurice asked David, and David said to him, let him think about it. Maurice said, "Son, if you snooze, you lose." And asked me if I wanted it, and I said, hell yes. Wayne and washing the dogs, Norman was talking to the pit. Wayne and washing the dogs, and Norman was taking the dog to the pit. As he was going through, the crowd separated him. You know how they do. They open up for you and close right behind you. Well, Maurice was behind Norman, and I was behind Maurice. Maurice was kind of grabbing people by the shoulders, making his way through the crowd. This old boy said, "Why don't you slap that 60-year-old hippie for grabbing you that way?" He said, "Man, shit, that's Maurice Carver. You'll be crazy to slap that man. He'll shoot a hole in you big enough to drive a truck through." Maurice had been telling me all the bite would be over in 45 minutes, and it was for Sampson. But about that time, Butcherboy came up and put a monster stomp on Sampson. After the fight, a little trouble broke out between a couple of boys doctoring old Sampson. Needless to say, both dogs died after the fight. We got Butcher out and doctored him up. We had him moving around a little bit. Even got his kidneys to move a little bit, but we lost him. He went into shock. The night before the fight, Earl Tudor called Maurice and told Maurice, "Son, I hear you're a terrible underdog." Maurice said, "That's what I hear too." Earl told him to not underestimate you. Earl told them to not underestimate you, that you have been pulling the underdog out from under the hat for the last 40 years. The rest of the story everybody knows. Butcherboy won the match in 1 hour and 25 minutes. I rode down there back with Norman, and I never saw anybody love a dog more than Norman loved that dog. A lot of folks would have just left their dog there, but not Norman. He took him home, and he buried him. And this is a story by the late Ronnie Hyde. And this is your boy Hellcat signing off. Till the next one. Later.